Almost every driver knows that they're supposed to do a pre-trip inspection of their tractor and trailer before they leave the yard. They also know that they're required to perform and document another complete inspection when they finish their work for the day. What happens too often is that drivers either don't conduct these inspections at all, or they do them so quickly that they don't see the things they should identify as needing repair. In this module, we're going to go over a technique for conducting a thorough vehicle inspection that will not only cover all the parts you need to check, but will also help you to do the job quickly and efficiently. Like we said earlier, for too many drivers, a pre-trip inspection involves little more than a quick tug on the kingpin, kicking the tires, and checking the lights. We've probably all done that kind of inspection at some point in our careers. We get a late load or are delayed for some reason, and we just don't take the time to check the truck the way we should. And most of us have probably gotten away with doing that kind of inspection. Nothing broke, and we didn't get stopped at a scale. So we just assumed everything was okay. The problem is that we can get in a lot of trouble when we make assumptions. We can drive a long way with a bad brake or two and never suspect that anything's wrong until there's an emergency and we can't stop in time. We can pull a trailer with an underinflated tire a long way before it blows out or throws a cap. And we can drive a long way with a worn drive belt or radiator hose and never know it until it breaks and we're stuck on the side of the road with a load of freight that's supposed to be somewhere else about that time. The thing is that any of these problems could probably have been identified during a good vehicle inspection and fixed before they caused a problem. The truth is that it's a lot more than 18 tires and 24 lights that are important to us as professional drivers. There are literally dozens of things we need to look at and make sure are in good operating condition. But who has the time to go through that many items? And even if we had the time, who could remember all that stuff? Well, there's a simple way to get the job done. Let's take a look. First thing we need to do is get the right tools for the job. When we're going to inspect a tractor trailer, we'll need a pair of gloves, a rag, a pair of pliers, and a flashlight if we're going to be checking our equipment at night. The second thing we need is a plan or a system for looking over our equipment. We can't just wander around looking here and there and expect that we're going to be either effective or efficient in finding any problems that might be there. We should start at the same place each time and follow the same process as we walk around the truck. This way, we'll be sure to look at all the potential problem areas and find anything that could go wrong. What we're going to look at next is an inspection process that's used by some of the nation's top drivers who've won top honors at the American Trucking Association's National Truck Driving Championships. To start with, make sure your truck is on a level spot and that the brakes are set. If it's on a slope or if there's any chance it could move during your inspection, it's a good idea to chock the wheels. And whenever you're moving around and under your truck, make sure you keep the keys in your pocket so no one can start and move it. Make a note of any problems you might see. Is it sitting level? Are there any puddles of fuel, oil, or coolant under it? Are you hooked up to the right trailer? If anything looks out of line, now's the time to figure out what it is and get it fixed. A leaning trailer could be a broken spring or airbag, or it could be that the trailer got parked with one set of wheels at a pothole. A puddle under the tractor could be a serious problem or a mess left by the last driver. Either way, we need to know if it's a problem that could cause an accident or breakdown for us. Next, we'll check the headlights. Flip them on and check the low beams. Check the high beams and turn the headlights off, but leave the marker lights on. Turn on the four-way flashers, and if you can, pull the trailer brake handle down a little to turn on the brake lights. Now we're ready to do the walk-around inspection. To begin this part of the inspection, we're going to open the hood and start on the right side or passenger side of the engine compartment. Here's where things could get confusing, but by using the truck itself as a sort of checklist, we can make sure we look at all the critical items we need to inspect. Now, the truck we'll use for our demonstration may not be exactly like yours, but you'll get the idea. We'll start the inspection by looking at the top left of the engine compartment and working our way across to the front of the truck and then down, one section at a time. It's kind of like reading a checklist. So we start by looking at the windshield wiper and whatever is on the firewall of the particular tractor. It could be a windshield washer fluid reservoir, it could be the air filter canister, or it may just be some wiring or hoses running into the heater core. Whatever is there, look it over and make sure that nothing is broken, cracked, loose, or missing. Make sure all braces and brackets are securely attached. If there's a filter minder or other restriction gauge on the air filter, check it to make sure there's no problem and that your engine can function at maximum power and efficiency. Check for any signs of problems with the air intake system. As you work your way toward the front, check for signs of leaking coolant hoses, and if the engine isn't hot, squeeze the hoses to make sure they're not brittle or cracked. Check the coolant tank and coolant level. Be sure that you never open the radiator cap if there's a chance the engine or coolant could be hot. Next, look at the back of the engine, the transmission and bell housing. Look for any leaks or other problems. Look at the exhaust system from the front side, checking for soot or other signs of exhaust leaks. Check the turbo and head gaskets for leaks. Check any oil and fuel filters that you see to make sure there are no leaks and that they're all tight. You should pull the oil dipstick and check the oil level. The alternator is usually on this side of the engine, so check to make sure it's securely mounted, that the belt is tight and not worn, and that all the wires are secure. At the front of the engine, check the water pump, fan, and radiator. Next, check the frame rails from back to front. Look for any signs of damage and to see that all suspension parts, springs, airbags, and shock absorbers are all properly mounted and secure. Any shiny parts under a truck are probably indications of a problem. Check the suspension parts themselves to make sure there are no broken or missing leaves in spring packs, no leaking or damaged shocks. Make sure the hinges for the hood and the wiring to the lights are all intact and in good condition. Then check the steering linkage. Look for any bent or damaged parts. Make sure all steering knuckles are secure and have cotter keys in place. Check the brake air lines to be sure they're not kinked or rubbing on the frame or other parts. Make sure the brake chamber is properly attached and aligned and that the push rod and slack adjuster are properly connected. Check the brake shoes to make sure they have at least a 1/4 inch of pad. The brake drums shouldn't be damaged or cracked or have signs of rust or oil on the braking surface. The outside of the brake drum and the inside of the rim should be dry and have no signs of oil or grease that could indicate a wheel seal leak. The rim shouldn't be cracked, welded, or otherwise damaged. The inside sidewall of the tire should be in good shape without any signs of cuts, bubbles, or other defects. The face of the tire should show no damage and even wear with at least 4/32 of tread depth. The outside sidewall should not be damaged or otherwise defective. The rim should have no damage. The lug nut should be tight and the outer wheel seal should be intact. If you can, you should check the hub to make sure it has the proper amount of oil. Now that may seem like an awful lot of stuff to check out, but let me make 2 important points here. First and foremost, is there anything that we check that isn't important? Is there something that we check that if it were to break or malfunction wouldn't cause an accident or a breakdown? If something were wrong with any of the items we checked and a DOT inspector found it, could we get a ticket and maybe be put out of service? My point is that we need to check all these things before and after every trip. Leaving the condition of our equipment to chance is just not acceptable for the professional driver. The second point I want to make is that it took a lot longer to talk about how to check our equipment than it would to just do it. Remember, other than pulling the dipstick and checking some belts and hoses, we never had to touch anything. We just looked at it and moved on if nothing was wrong. What we just described actually takes about a minute or so for the experienced driver. When we move to the other side of the engine compartment, we'll follow the same pattern. only we'll find some different equipment. We'll find the steering sector and maybe the air conditioning. We'll most likely find the air compressor on this side. Again, we'll check for leaks, hoses, belts, and equipment attachment and security, just like we did before. In fact, we'll use these same techniques to check brakes, suspension parts, wheels and tires all the way around the tractor and trailer as we go through the inspection. After we close up the hood, as we continue our walk around, we'll check the lights on the front and right side of the tractor. We can check the mirrors to make sure they're not damaged and are secured properly. We'll check the fuel tanks for leaks or damage. It's not a bad idea to check the fuel level just in case the fuel gauge is broken. As we move back to the rear of the tractor, we need to check for the proper reflective tape and look at the exhaust system from the rear. We need to check for any problems with the driveline, leaks in the rear ends, and check the tires, brakes, and suspension system like we did earlier. Since we're looking at dual wheels and tires, we'll need to check to make sure there's no debris stuck between the tires that could fly out once we get on the highway. If there are air tanks on this side of the tractor, we'll need to check them and any tubing we can see for damage or other defects. And it's important to check the fifth wheel, looking for any cracks or damage and making sure that mounting brackets, bolts, and sliding mechanisms are all in place and not damaged. We'll need to get under the trailer if one's attached and check the security of the fifth wheel kingpin connection by checking to see that the jaws are securely in place around the neck of the kingpin. And whichever side it's on, we'll need to check the fifth wheel release handle to make sure it's in the locked position. We'll also need to check the rear lighting on the tractor. As we check the trailer, we need to look over the landing gear to make sure it's not damaged. We need to check the lights, reflectors, and reflective tape to make sure they're all in good condition. And don't forget to look for damage to the equipment that should be reported to your manager before you leave the yard. Just like we did before, we'll need to slide under the trailer to check out the tires, brakes, and suspension. We'll need to check the air tanks and make sure they're securely connected. And if they have drain valves, we should drain any water, especially if we're running in cold weather. This is where the pliers come in handy. At the rear of the trailer, we need to check the lighting and reflective tape. The doors and hinges have to be in good condition and secure. And if the doors aren't sealed, we should check to make sure the load is properly balanced and braced. We should also check to make sure the under-ride bumper and mud flaps are in good condition. As we move around the rest of the trailer and back to the tractor, we'll follow the same process as we did on the other side. Once we've checked out the outside of the unit, we're ready to check the last few things in the cab. We're almost done, but what we have left is really important. Let's start by checking our emergency equipment. We need a fully charged fire extinguisher of the right size for the load we're hauling. Most of the time, having an extinguisher with an Underwriters Laboratory rating of 10 BC or greater is a good idea. It has to be readily accessible for use and has to be secured to prevent sliding or rolling around inside the cab. You'll also need 3 reflective triangles to set out in case you end up stopping in or along a roadway. By the way, if you're not sure how and when to use these warning devices, ask your safety manager. It's important information to know. Now, let's turn our lights off and start the engine. Once it starts, we should check the gauges to make sure they're registering properly, especially the oil pressure and the voltmeter or ammeter. Check the steering wheel for free play. It shouldn't be more than a few inches and not more than 10 degrees. Check your mirrors for proper adjustment and make sure they're clean. If you need to clean any of your lights, windows, or mirrors, make sure to do it before you leave. Now let's check our air brake system. By now the system should be fully pressurized and the gauge should read somewhere around 120 pounds. Charge the trailer brake system, shut the engine off, and release the parking brakes. Firmly press the brake pedal and hold it for about a minute. After an initial loss of pressure when you apply the brakes, you shouldn't lose any more air pressure. The regulations allow for some air loss, but if there's a leak, you're a lot better off finding it and fixing it before you start your trip. You never know what may be causing it, and it could get worse quickly. Losing air pressure is not something to take chances with. Assuming there are no leaks, pump the brake pedal rapidly to reduce the air pressure in the system. Once the pressure gets to between 55 and 60 pounds, there must be a low air warning device that activates. When the pressure reaches between 20 and 40 pounds, the emergency system must activate and set all the brakes. If any of these systems fail, you need to get them repaired before you leave. Not only is it dangerous to drive with a defective air brake system, it's an out-of-service violation if you get caught. Finally, as you start the engine and let the air pressure build back up, check over your paperwork. Do you have the right permits and insurance information? A lot of times we put things in our trucks and then never check them again. Then when we need them, we can't find them or some of the items have expired. It pays to check them out once in a while. And lastly, make sure your logbook is up to date. If you have an onboard computer to track your hours of service, make sure you've logged in properly and make any pre-dispatch entries that may be required. All of this sounds like a lot of work, but it really only takes about 10 to 15 minutes. Knowing that your equipment is in good and safe operating condition is not only the law, it's great peace of mind while you're going down the road. And don't forget that when you get back, you'll need to take a little more time to check things over again and make a written report on each tractor and trailer you operate during the course of the day. This helps ensure that any problems get fixed before you or the next driver has to use the equipment again. There's nothing quite as frustrating as showing up for a load only to find out that some other driver left you with a trailer that isn't ready for the road. Don't be that kind of driver. Watch out for the safety and convenience of your fellow professionals. Like we said earlier, you may find that the equipment that you operate isn't exactly like what we've used here as a demonstration. But I hope you get the idea and can apply these ideas and procedures to your job. If you have any questions, please be sure to ask your dispatcher or safety manager for help. Vehicle inspections. They're your first step to defensive driving.